Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about a book that I just finished and am really excited to share my thoughts about. And that would be Winterkeep by Kristin Cashore. And I am aware of the irony of doing an introductory video talking about how my goal on BookTube was to be able to read more adult fantasy and chat about adult fantasy with other people who are fans of the genre, and the very first book review I do is for a young adult book. However, the Graceling Realms series, it used to be the trilogy, but series, is one of my favorite YA series of all time. It is a series of books that I have loved since they came out. I think it was in like 2008 or so. I read Graceling when it was released and the other books as they were released and adored all of them. And so when I heard that Kristin Cashore was writing a fourth book in the Saga, I was kind of equally excited and apprehensive. So I am going to stop holding this up now, but just for one more look at this gorgeous cover. This is probably the most beautiful cover that I will buy this year, and I just love it so much. But I will put that down and then get to talking. So Winterkeep, as I said, is a continuation of the Graceling Realms saga. I need to keep correcting myself, from trilogy that Kristin Cashore wrote in the late 2000s. And it takes place in a land called the Seven Kingdoms and follows characters who have particular powers called graces. So Gracelings, as you find out in the first book of the trilogy, are individuals who are born with two different color eyes and an incredible skill of some sort. The skill is not always apparent because it could be something really random, like always being able to find a pink rock on the beach, or it could be something very specific like the grace of fighting, of excellent cooking, of so many things. The options are limitless, and some people in this series have really profound and impactful graces, and some of them have some very subtle and not so helpful graces. And so you get to see kind of the run of abilities throughout the series. The second book in the series, Fire, focuses on a different continent called the Dells that is inhabited by creatures that the Delians call monsters. So these are animals with beautiful, vibrant plumage that draw people in with their beauty and then manipulate and control their minds, most often to eat them, but in the case of monsters who are human or humanoid, I guess, to be able to manipulate them into doing things that they want to do. So in Fire, we follow one of these humanoid monsters named Fire and follow her story as it progresses. And then in the third book of what used to be the trilogy, we follow a young queen named Bitterblue who has no powers at all and has to learn to rule in a world that has been both positively and negatively influenced by these Gracelings, and to contend with the fact that there are other worlds out there that are populated with people who have other powers and other abilities. And that idea of exploration and of people and places that are different from the main setting is one that is explored in Winterkeep. So the setup for Winterkeep is that Queen Bitterblue, who was established as a character in the third book, has discovered that there is a land across the sea. And this land has one country or province, I'm not really sure how they refer to them, known as Winterkeep. And this is a land where there is advanced technology that is not found in Bitterblue's own kingdom, and a land where there are foxes who can communicate telepathically with humans, where there are animals that can communicate from the ocean. And she sends an envoy to this land, and on the way back the ship goes down, and Bitterblue receives a letter that makes her start to wonder if her ship sinking and losing her friends was something that was accidental or if it was something that was politically contrived. And so she decides to go and set off across the ocean and visit Winterkeep herself. This story differs from the main trilogy in a couple of different ways, but the most this story differs from the original trilogy in a couple of different ways, but the most immediately apparent is that it is not focused on one single character. So the stories of Graceling, Fire, and Bitterblue are all, you follow one character and you get to know them really well. You find out all about their personality, their wants, their desires, their fears, and it is their narrative that kind of propels the story forward. But in Winterkeep, we see Kristin Cashore's first kind of movement into that multi-POV style that is so popular in fantasy right now. And the characters that we follow are two that are familiar to us. That would be Bitterblue and Giddon, who is a character who originally we saw in Graceling and then who came back in Bitterblue and who has kind of changed and grown over the course of this series. And then we have three other POV characters that are new. One of them is Levisa, the daughter of the Prime Minister of Winterkeep and a student at the college in town. Then there is the Keeper, which is a creature that lives under the ocean and about whom there are kind of myths and stories in Winterkeep, but who very much wants to be left alone. And then the final perspective is from one of the telepathic foxes, whose name is Adventure. So we follow these 5 perspectives, with the Keeper's perspective coming only intermittently throughout the story, while the other ones are much more prominent. And we follow them as Queen Bitterblue travels to Winterkeep and becomes embroiled in political machinations and in the ups and downs of the society of Winterkeep. We follow Giddon as he tries to navigate through Winterkeep and advocate for his queen and to help solve the mystery that was so dear to her heart. And we follow Levisa as she finds out that her parents, who definitely had their issues from the start, may not be the people that she thought they were. And we follow the telepathic fox Adventure as he gives us perspective into lots of different characters and about how the characters interact with the environment around them. So the premise is essentially a mystery to find out what happened to Bitterblue's friends, and we get to unravel that mystery by following all of these different characters. I will start off by saying that I really enjoyed Winterkeep. Whenever an author comes back to a beloved series, there's always that intermingling of hope and despair, wanting it to be the thing that you fell in love with and afraid that it is not going to live up either to your nostalgia or just to the heights that the other books attained. I was definitely apprehensive going into this, and while I didn't love Winterkeep with the same kind of ferocity that I loved Graceling and Fire and Bitterblue, I'm also, 12 years older than when I read those books. I was much closer. I wasn't exactly in the target demographic, but I was much closer to the target demographic at the time that I read Graceling. And I have changed. The things that I like in stories have changed a little bit, but I still really enjoyed this. I think that Kristin Cashore does a lot of things in general really well, and those strengths shone through in this novel. I'll break it down a little bit and just talk about the various elements and what worked for me and what didn't work as much for me. The writing, Kristin Cashore's writing is very crisp, it's very clean and concise. She doesn't get bogged down in a lot of adjectives. Her prose is eminently readable without being excessively flowery. So that was definitely a strength here. I also always really like her characters. While I didn't feel as connected to any of these characters as I had in previous books, which is interesting because Bitterblue is a character in a previous book, and I felt much more connected to her through that single POV that we had in Bitterblue, as opposed to as one of kind of a collection of characters in Winterkeep. But that, I think, is a personal preference. I really like single POV stories. I like being able to explore a character's motivations, to be able to really get to know them. And most of my favorite stories are single POV. The characters here are still dynamic, they're still complex, they still have problems and struggles, and I think that they're painted very well. It's just that I don't always know that we get below the surface. I don't want to say they're one-dimensional because they're not. They are, like I said, very complexly drawn. They have struggles, they make decisions that are horrible, they have to contend with some very difficult emotions, and I think that Kristin Cashore is an expert at helping us to see the complicated emotions that drive what we do and how our values and our actions don't always necessarily line up, and what sort of outside influences impact the decisions that we have to make. So that was all excellent. I just personally didn't feel as connected to the characters, with the exception of the fox character, because I do love an animal character, but I didn't really feel as connected to the other characters as I had to, let's say, Katza or Fire from some of the previous books. The world building I quite enjoyed. Outside of naming, which I think has been a bit of an issue, I haven't always loved the names that Kristin Cashore has picked for her kingdoms or her people in the past, but I did enjoy the name Winterkeep. I thought it was very fitting, very atmospheric. But I remember seeing when Kristin Cashore was writing this book, or plotting this book at least, that she had visited one of the poles. I don't know if it was Antarctica or the Arctic, but she had gone on some sort of cruise and was posting pictures to her blog of icebergs. And I don't know if it is because she loves wintry places or if it's because of the influence of her travel, but her descriptions, her development of a wintry capital, a wintry city, were exquisite. The descriptions of icebergs, which where I live, I'm very fortunate to get to see those in the summertime. They captured that sense of awe and majesty that you feel when you're surrounded by nature in that way. And I think that really helped the setting come to life here. The setting of Winterkeep is very much a character in this book, as much as any of the people, and that really shines through. That is one of the biggest strengths of the book, in my opinion. You feel like you intimately know Winterkeep, like you understand the ecology, how people are influenced and impact the land in turn, and it was really interesting to see her build that up. I really enjoyed the setting in this book. The plot itself, it reminded me a lot of Bitter Blue, which at its core also had this central mystery, and you were kind of twisting and turning, trying to navigate. I didn't feel like there were any particular plot conveniences. I thought that she did a good job of sowing the seeds for discontent amongst a bunch of the upper echelons of Winterkeep society, a bunch of the people who maneuver within the upper echelons of Winterkeep society. There was cause and motive for the various crimes from a bunch of different people, and I think that the central mystery was very well done. Thematically, Kristin Cashore, I don't think anyone could disagree that she is an author who has a very clear intent in terms of what she wants to explore thematically. And this was the same in Graceling, in Fire, in Bitter Blue. Kristin Cashore has a good grasp on the things that influence and impact people, and that shines through really strongly in her books. In Winterkeep, she raises the issues of environmental protection, of the impact that humans have on the environment, of abuse, of poor parenting, of the complicated dynamics between parents and children, and she explores a lot of these topics really well. One minor criticism that I do have, and what I think would throw off some people reading this book, is that she is very heavy-handed with her themes. There is not a lot of subtlety. We know what Kristin Cashore's stance is on these issues, and we know it from the very first page. And I agree with and believe a lot of the same things that she seems to believe, and a lot of the things that she champions through her books. So it doesn't bother me that much, but for people who like their themes to be subtly woven into the book, to have to push a little bit harder or think a little bit more to discover what the author wanted to convey or what the motivations of certain characters might be, you're not going to find that here. This is very upfront, it is very in your face, but I think that these are topics that are worth exploring, so I don't necessarily think that it impacted my reading experience that much. for those of you who have read the other books in the Graceling realms, they are, like many YA fantasies, very romance heavy. They have strong romantic subplots and complex relationships that are built on mutual trust and understanding. And that is the same in Winterkeep. The relationship that develops, which I won't get into because I don't want to be spoilery, but the relationship that develops is something that has happened very organically, very slowly. But to me, it didn't have that same intensity or that same, it didn't impact me in the same way that the relationships from previous books had. And that could be because it is kind of a friendship that blossoms into romance, which in terms of romance tropes is not one that I'm super interested in. I don't feel like the stakes are ever particularly high. We know in a romance that people are going to get together, and so it doesn't ever feel to me like there's anything surprising that's happening. I know a lot of people really love that romance trope, and so they will probably really like this relationship. I still like that the characters ended up together. It's just that I didn't really feel invested in the romantic subplot in this book. And for me, that was something that I had enjoyed so much about the previous books that I was a little disappointed that I couldn't get really into it here. Overall, I feel like there was a lot to like in Winterkeep. Things that particularly appealed to me included the world building, and especially that nature and animals played such a big part in the novels. If you like that, then I think that you will like a lot of what this book has to offer. If you don't like animal companions or anthropomorphized animals, you probably won't like this at all. I thought that the themes were maybe a bit obvious, but still things that were worth exploring and things that were important to talk about. Kristin Cashore often weaves in mental health difficulties and topics like suicide, suicidal ideation, depression into her books. Past trauma and psychological or physical abuse often show up in these novels, and I think that they're handled in a really respectful way that opens you up to a wide variety of defense mechanisms that people can establish, to the hard truth that trauma manifests differently in different people, and it can impact the way that you live your life. It can impact the choices that you make. And that is honestly one of my favorite parts of these books. Mental health is a big part of my work life. It is something that I'm really passionate about. And I think that Kristin Cashore writes some of the best YA fantasy that deals with these topics in a really inclusive and organic way. All in all, I think that this is totally worth picking up. I don't think that it is a disappointment when you compare it with the past volumes. And if anything, it just made me really want Kristin Cashore to write more in this universe. I think that the opportunities for expansion here are endless. I so enjoy the magic systems that she has developed and put into place, and I would really like to know what happens next. There were a lot of moral dilemmas and conundrums that came up at the end of this book and as a result of what happened in this book that I think would be really interesting to see explored, especially in this young adult lens. So my only hope is that we get more of these books moving forward, and I hope that people who have enjoyed the Graceling series in the past go on to enjoy Winterkeep as well. If you have read it, please let me know what you thought and how you feel, and I'll see you with another video soon. Bye.